Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a review for the 2021 WGC Workday Championship as well as the 2021 Puerto Rico Open. Puerto Rico Open isn't going to be very long. We'll just kind of do a little overview of it, but I do intend to spend a little bit more time than usual on the WGC Workday because I'll just be frank with you. I didn't do very well this week. I know there were a lot of good winners out there, or a lot of people that had like Colin Morikawa and stuff like that. I kind of just went blindly with the optimizer, which is strongly around my SweetSpot score. And I didn't really get on too many shares of Colin Morikawa, which was a little unfortunate because he did pop in the model. So there was a little issues with the optimizer as well as just this tournament in general. So I'll get to that when we get to the Workday Championship, but you can find timestamps in the description. I also have chapter mode enabled. The progress bar on YouTube's cut up into segments. You hover over them, it will show you which segment is what. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the Puerto Rico Open. So Brandon Grace won. It was his first win in over 5 years. He gets a 2-year exemption for winning the Puerto Rico Open. So this is an important tournament to go to. My favorite and a lot of people's favorites, Thomas Pieters, ended up finishing 15th, which is a little disappointing because the top 10 of this tournament gets to go to the next tournament. I'm not sure if it's at the Invite or if it would be like the Honda Classic, but unfortunately Pieters doesn't. I mean, the only reason I'm bringing him up because he is a favorite golfer of mine. He's very talented. But yeah, Grace won, birdieing the last hole. Johnny Vegas was looking to win for the very first time. And if you look, Grayson Murray is up at the top of the leaderboard too. He ended up sniping one into the woods on the left on hole 18, which basically ruined his chances for any title victory or any hopes of victory. I don't think he would have won either way. I think this was Grace's to lose. And a lot of, if you were listening to PGA Tour radio at all, a lot of people were talking about how Grace was kind of coming into form. And I only played one game, like one contest on DraftKings, and it was a quarter game. I wasn't going to invest much into this because I didn't do a lot of research going into this. So I didn't really lose anything, playing this tournament. In fact, the contest that the lineup I had only had one missed cut, which was pretty fantastic. But either way, I didn't make any money. If we were to go ahead and look at the spreadsheet here, during the strategy video or the preview video that I did for the Puerto Rico Open, I said look at recent form. We were going to find a bunch of golfers with very poor recent form finishing up inside the top 10. And it didn't change at all. Maybe we probably see a few more, 40 to 60s, but for the most part, a lot of it was that red. And I mean, when I made that comment in that preview, I didn't really realize, I didn't look at it from the entire field's perspective. We only really had 17 golfers out of 130 that didn't have a recent form of 60 and greater. So just by numbers alone, we were going to see poor recent form inside the top 10. So it wasn't really that good of a tell. And I didn't realize until after I made the video, but I did want to present a video. The only thing that I kind of regret is not having the bucket system ready for you guys. As you can see, the top 10 looks really good with last year 1s, last year 2s, as well as last week 1s. Pretty much dominate the inside of the top 10, all but 2, the winner and then Andrew Putnam that finished 5th. So I kind of wish I would have showed that, but I do believe that the buckets were pretty large anyways. If you were trying to find a last year 1 to choose from, you had to sort through basically 51 golfers. Last year 2s, those were top 20 finishes. Obviously under 20, ended up having 18 of those. So you can see everybody. I mean, that would have probably been the easier one to go with, honestly, looking at your last year twos, finding a top 20 from the year before. I don't think this is enough to push the last year ones out of place. Actually, it's a tie, so it wouldn't. But either way, you had to select 4 out of 18. That's pretty easy in my opinion. But yeah, we could also look at strokes gained. I like doing this with the strokes gained buckets. Looking at off the tee stats to go with strokes gained putting, basically. So I'm always looking to see all your positive guys. And like Rafael Campos, if you didn't know, he's a native of Puerto Rico. This is his home golf course. He should have been a lock at $6,800. I don't know what his course history is, but he has several top 10s here. So 34.67. Yeah, he should have been a lock, especially when you see the stats like that. A positive off the tee, positive putting. You see positive off the tee, negative putting. You know that's the strokes gained bucket 3 usually. We have another guy here, and then we have negative off the tee, positive putting, and then negative. Like this tournament looks just like a regular PGA Tour event. Regardless of how weak of a field it is, strokes gained still shows up where you need a mix of everything. You know, not one stat really shows up like, ooh, you need to play golfers with this one stat. And you know that's kind of my thing whenever I listen to people, you know, in the DFS community talk about we want ball strikers this week. We want people who have great approach stats. That's not true. Like ever. If you want the optimal lineup, you're going to have to find the right combination of golfers. And this tournament is no different. I think that's about it. If you have any questions, you want to know anything more about this tournament, just email me or leave a comment in Twitter. Or you can DM me in Twitter, but you can also leave a comment in the YouTube comments, and I will definitely get back to you on it. But yeah, let me know if you want to know any more about the Puerto Rico Open. Now, the main tournament, WGC Workday Championship, first time that it was played outside. Well, first time at the Concession Golf Club. We already talked about that in the preview. There's a lot of carnage out there, a lot of water balls. Colin Morikawa is your winner, which is, I mean, he had a really good speech after he won, thanking Tiger and the fact that we don't really think thank the legends or our heroes or anything like that more often. I thought it was fantastic. You know, he's a world-class person as well as a world-class winner. And unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of Colin Morikawa this week. And like I said, let me actually admit something different. A lot of what I'm doing over the last couple of weeks is trial and error. I'm really trying to experiment with different ways of lineup creating. Some of you guys I may have reached out to just to see your opinions on ownership, what should be minimum or maximum ownership on certain price ranges or so on and so forth, and a lot of varying different opinions. But I'm trying to, you know, as I always do every single week, I'm trying to figure out how to find the optimal lineup. That's why the bucket system's created. I mean, the bucket system's also to narrow down player pools, which we'll see could have helped us a lot, even for this tournament. But yeah, Colin Morikawa, one of those guys, wasn't on my radar, unfortunately. I know a lot of people were touting him, but I just, for the reasons that I was hearing, I didn't care for it. But Victor Hovland showed up, Brooks Koepka. Those 3 golfers alone showed very little in the optimizer that I used. And if you know what the optimizer is, or if you know what any optimizer does, is it just looks at whatever stat that you throw in the model, and it tries to find a working salary around that metric, basically. So I use the SweetSpot Score, and I'll get into that. But unfortunately, it didn't show up. Or not so much show up. It just wasn't good enough to find those 3 guys, essentially. It is a WGC event, which means the best golfers in the world are here. A new golf course, a lot of water. It was a very tough, difficult golf course. So like, I'm not too bummed in a way. It was unfortunate that I just wasn't able to share in the success that I saw across Twitter, but either way, let's go on and get through this. The first place I usually like to look at, looking at the optimal lineup versus it says $1, but it's really the $5 GPP. So that was the highest entry fee GPP that I entered. The winning lineup had Colin Morikawa, Brooks Koepka, Victor Hovland, Billy Horschel, Scotty Scheffler, and Lanto Griffin. You can see everybody highlighted in blue. That was the $5 winning GPP lineup. It scored 643.5 points. The optimal lineup scored 654.5. If you were in the strategy, or I think the preview video actually, you'd have saw last year there was a 5-point difference between the optimal lineup and the winning lineup, the GPP winning lineup. This time it was 11 points. Yes, 11 points. And the optimal lineup used 5 of those golfers that the GPP winning lineup did, but the only difference was instead of using Lanto, it used Kevin Na. And that was the 11-point difference. And really, you could have switched out Kevin Na for Abram Answer. Let's see, who else could you have switched him out for? If we went by DK points. So Kevin Na is at 6,800. We need to just find anyone that's 6,800 or less. So Brennan Todd, Minwoo Lee. I know a lot of people were on him. It's a joke. No one was. Abram Answer, Thomas Detry. I was on Thomas Detry. So any of these guys, if you would have paired with those 5, would have given you a better score than that GPP winning lineup. From here, what I'm going to do is I want to know if we could have gotten on this lineup somehow. Usually I like to go through all the stats, which I'm still going to do, but we're really just going to focus on the bucket system. So if I pull up the 2021 DK page here, I kind of was already looking through a lot of the stuff. I have this from position top to bottom, but what I'm really going to do is just clear everybody out and only look at golfers. I mean, we have to include 11th place because that's where one of our optimal lineup guys are. But really just look at, these golfers here. And the first place that I want to look at really is, first of all, the last year, last week buckets. That's kind of the origin of the bucket system. How many last year ones, how many last year twos, how many last year threes, fours, whatever. And it's pretty standard. Usually at any given tournament, and this is something I've thought about doing in the future, where I give you a comprehensive bucket system, like what are the averages every single, or, for a time period, what is the last year one bucket usually? Is it that 20 to 40 range? Is it that 40 to 60 range? What distinguishes it differently, or essentially what shows up the most? That way you can see, if we go into every single tournament, okay, yep, we see 2 to 3 last year ones. We're going to see 2 to 3 last year ones all the time. Which, I mean, of the top 11, we see 4 golfers that were last year ones. Same goes with last year twos. We see 2. Now that's probably a little less than usual, but very much needed in the optimal lineup, as you can see. For last year threes, we see a few more. I mean, we have 3 last year threes, 2 last year fours, 3 last year fours, and then 1 last year 5. I know that's kind of messy on the screen, but Webb was not a part of the optimal lineup. I'm not saying you couldn't get, a good lineup with or without Webb. With Webb. But again, he wasn't in the optimal lineup. So if you faded him because he was last year 5, it wouldn't really have hurt you, but it still would have been beneficial to have him. He finished 10th in the model. So the score over here on the left side is my model. Usually what I like to see, well, let's remove this. What I usually want to see is sort this by top to bottom, and I need to get rid of Cantlay. Funny thing, I didn't realize Cantlay. I can't remember if I had created my strategy video before I heard I feel like I had to have. Before Cantlay withdrew, and then he's on my thumbnail for the Workday, which And what can you do? He was a favorite of mine coming into this tournament. Obviously, he's out. Let's focus here. So what I want to see from the score from top to bottom, I want to see more top 20s than I do missed cuts, usually on a given tournament. But because this is a no-cut event, what I'd want to see is more top 10s or more top 20s than 40 to 60. And obviously, you know, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 golfers that finished that 40 to 60. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, I mean, it worked out. Actually, Harris English would have also been included in that top 20. Or what do you have? No, you wouldn't. Oh, he would have because Patrick Cantlay wasn't in the tournament. So it was even. But then when I look at the 20 to 40 ranges, nothing really was close to like 20. We couldn't have used any of these golfers. So the score, what I made it up of, was looking at the bucket combinations, as you can see right here. Maybe I should remove that. Actually, I want to see what that looks like afterwards. I'm not going to do it right now during live, you know, it's going to take too long. But if I were to, I don't even think if I were to remove this, if it would really matter. I think it would actually hurt people like Kevin Kisner more, which actually would help. Now that I see that. It would also hurt Tommy Fleetwood, which again, that's probably what we want. Maybe I'll take the bucket combination scores out of it and see. Obviously, this is kind of a sum. How about that? Let's just do it. I want to see what this looks like, and that's fine. This isn't going to take very long, and then you guys can learn how to do a rank on. If you don't know how to do it, you can learn how to do a rank on Excel. So go over to this column and go rank. We need our parameter. So it's his score. And obviously, if you follow along if you're doing this on yourself, I actually have this removed, but it'll tell you what you need. So value, just go click in that cell and hold down shift, left click, that gives me the whole range. And then you can go ahead and hit F4 and that'll set that, lock it in. You're going to need that because we're going to click and drag all the way down. And we want this the other way since it's a higher score up top. And already, Colin Morikawa, what does he change from? 13 to 9. Okay, so already good. And we scroll down. Sure, I'll go all the way down to Cantlay. Cantlay is going to still stay at 4. Okay. Let's see, what did it look like? So 19 for Billy. He goes to 31. That's not good. Basically, the score stays the same. It gets worse for our guys up top. So including the bucket score is the way to go. Or is it? What am I? It gets worse for some. It gets better for others. Altogether, though. Okay, so this is right now. This would be with the bucket combination included. Sum equals 23. And we do this, looking at top 10. I said 203. This actually equals 198. So we improved by 5 points. I mean, I think maybe it gets us more onto Morikawa. More likely it will. It would. So, yeah, okay. I think I need to, in the future, remove the bucket combination because when I do run the optimizer, it's already looking at the bucket combinations, and I kind of was trying to toy around with that when I was building lineups. I did a lot of work this weekend looking at my optimizer and trying to figure out, what made sense and what didn't make sense. There was a huge thing where I just, as you know how most optimizers work, unless you don't put something into it to say you want all unique lineups, if you weren't setting constraints, you'd get the same lineup over and over and over again because there's no rules telling your optimizer not to do that. Well, my optimizer is built off of Excel, built by scratch. I got ideas from online how to build it, but didn't know how to add that functionality. So now I added a min exposure as well as a max exposure. I didn't have the min exposure before, so I was missing out on some guys. Like Cam Smith didn't show up on any of my lineups because of that. Colin Morikawa, I think, showed up in 3 or something like that. But if I were to set a minimum exposure to like, I want to make sure he's in 10% of my lineups, that way I can set it that way. So that's what I figured out this week, which is great. But before I kind of go into stats, kind of left to right, I want to review the bucket system as a whole. So I'm going to go ahead and open these columns up. And I think you know, if you've been with me in the strategy video, how it all shakes out. We have our strokes gained bucket, course history, recent form buckets, last year bucket, last week bucket. They all get ranks. The lower the number, the better. And really, we're trying to find the right mix of golfers. I usually always say I never want to find more than 2 5s within the string whatsoever. So as you can see, everyone inside the top 10, we don't really see 2 5s. I'm really not sure if, I suppose some of our guys down here are going to have multiple 5s or 6s, although I'm not seeing any. I think the highest number would be a 5, and it only happens a few times. Our winner was a last year 5. I guess Kevin Na would have had a 5 for strokes gained bucket. The best way I can do this, I think, is first kind of going over a review of what each of the buckets are. So we'll start with last year, last week buckets. This table here is your last year buckets. This is your last week bucket. Obviously, the bucket scores based off of the range and the frequency year to year of golfers finishing inside that average finishing position. Not average, but the finishing position in that range. So obviously, if you finished, say you finished, Colin Morikawa next year will be a last year 2 because he finished top 20 this year. He obviously won it, but he will fit in this bucket right here. So that's kind of how it goes. Either way, your number 1 bucket for last year were golfers who finished 1 to 20 the year before. Golfers in that last year bucket 2 are golfers who did not play the year before. And then 3 is the 20 to 40 range. For last week bucket, your number 1 bucket were golfers who did not play. Number 2 was that 1 to 40 range. Number 3 were actually golfers who missed the cut. So this is looking at the tournament just before this one, every single year. So last week, it would have been the Genesis Invitational. I obviously don't have numbers, updated, and that's kind of on purpose. I don't want to, make this review muddy, essentially. So keep all of that in mind when we go to recent form course history. Your number 1 course history bucket were golfers that fell in that 1 to 20 range. Now, this is looking at an average every single year, and obviously still doing that frequency count of how many show up inside that bucket every single year, and then obviously ranking them based off of the totals. So number 1 was that 1 to 20 range. Number 2 was that 20 to 40. Number 3 had no course history. For recent form, our number 1 was at 20 to 40. Number 2 was at 40 to 60, believe it or not. And number 3 was 1 to 20. And the reason I keep track of all this stuff is because primarily what I said during the Puerto Rico Open when we're looking at that DK page, we need to figure out a way to find all the golfers in the optimal lineup. I know it's fool's gold. I've already been told that a lot, but I also don't see anyone tracking that information. I don't see anybody really digging into it. If I were to tell you, hey, here, for a lottery ticket, find somebody that's in this 40 to 60 course history bucket range, and perhaps this did not play, or even 1 to 20 is easy, but 40 to 60, if I were to say that isn't the number 2 bucket, some of you guys might scratch your head and go, that is kind of weird. We want to find golfers who, have been doing poorly coming into this tournament. And yes, some of that is true. So if we go ahead and look at these buckets, I'm going to exclude the strokes gained bucket. Let me just hide that so you guys, I don't want to mess anything up. We'll get to that soon. But if we look at course history, recent form, what I want to do is when I look at, the top 11, again, we're looking at 11 because Kevin Na is in the optimal lineup. If I scroll down and look in the course history bucket, I only have two golfers that are a course history 4 or worse. Just 2. That's it. Everybody else falls in that 2, 3, or 1. So when I see this, again, it's trying to figure out how to make those lineups. Now, the optimal lineup had the course history 2, actually 4 of them, and then a course history 3 and a 4. This kind of is disappointing in a way because I had told you your minimum for course history 1 was 3. You wanted to find 3 golfers. Obviously, in review, we can't come up with that in an optimal lineup. And I've kind of been thinking about this week in and week out as I've been analyzing optimal lineups and looking at buckets. I'm not sure if there should be a minimum. I mean, yeah, sure, Rory showed up, and we could have made a winning lineup. You know, a lineup that would have beat the GPP winning lineup with Rory in it. So I believe it was like Rory, Billy, Morikawa. I think we would have had to had Kokrak. That leaves me with. So I could have went something like this. And let me see if that actually shakes out. Could be wrong. So that didn't work out. I wish I would have. I thought about like highlighting it just to see if it would have worked out, but I do know I had one that scored 652, so I'm going to try to figure that out, which was still underneath the optimal lineup. No, it went like this. Was it Louis? I need someone 6,300. Probably not. I don't think this one was it either. 641, 643. Huh. I guess if you guys see it, let me know in the chat, because I don't know why I can't find it. Maybe it's just not doable with Rory McIlroy. So regardless, I guess we'll move on. But you know, yeah, we did have 2 golfers here with the course history bucket of 1. Maybe that's a good reason to play Cameron Smith. I think if we were to play Cameron Smith, we have to not play Scotty Scheffler. What's that point difference? A lot, 20. So yeah, there's no way we would have won that GPP winning lineup. Okay, so I guess I was wrong. I should have highlighted it. I knew when I was looking at it, I'm like, maybe I should create another highlight bucket right here just to say an alternate lineup that would have beat the $5 that works with our buckets. But no, forgot to do that, or just didn't. Either way, so yeah, we had 2 course history 1s. Let's see, how many 2s were there? Quite a bit. We had 16. Now, these guys down here aren't going to actually match in neither of these, but we had, 6 versus 1? And if we look at the buckets, we're looking at course history 29. It's still not going to bump out that range. But here's the thing. What I feel like, and I should have waited to do this after analyzing all of the buckets, this golf course lend itself to be volatile. When you have that much water in play, it really does not afford, it's not forgiving. So where some of our guys that might have been more in the course history bucket 1, who had, T-balls that went into the water or whatever, perhaps that doesn't happen at Chapultepec. Perhaps that doesn't happen at Doral. I know Doral has a lot of water, but this course, just because of how different it was, maybe that's why the buckets didn't really work out the way that we thought they would. But even if we look at recent form buckets, we don't even see a 4 or greater. If I were to actually look at every 4 or greater, how many did we actually have? Quite a bit. 31. So half of the field. So if you were to cut out half of the field, Like, no one scored better than 18th place with a recent form bucket of 4 or greater. So obviously, for me, again, it's there has to be some kind of weighting, like a weight model that appears for here, let me double check something. I'm not sure if I had that correct. Yeah, okay, I did. I need a weight model basically to see everyone that's 4 or greater. I mean, course history bucket, there's only buckets 1 through 4. So there aren't a lot. 2 of them actually showed up inside the top 10. So that's not really a good sign, but I always think of 4s are in play. Every time you hear me do any of these videos, I say 5 or 6s are not in play. I think Webb was the only last year 5. Yeah, he was the only last year 5, but there's a ton of last year 4s. But it's a good way to kind of mix up, your player pool. It allows you to get on some golfers, but it shouldn't get you on all of them. Like, having 6 last year 1s probably was not the way to do it. So if you had Kevin Kisner and Billy Horschel, may not have been good, pairing them up with like Rory and Patrick Reed, because that would have left you with nearly 16,300 for your next 2 spots, which is obviously $8,000 for each golfer. What if I put Fleetwood in? That this would have equaled 50,000. So like, this was a doable lineup, but it's supposed to prevent you from putting too many. So a maximum would be great, not so much a minimum. Like, I'm thinking of constraints, like don't play more than 3 or 4 last year 1s. Like, that's probably a better thought process than say you want to play at least 2 to 3 last year 1s, because I don't know if you can actually get there. So those are just things that I'm thinking about. But yeah, if we look at the top 10 only, or top 11, and look at all the buckets, like it shows up pretty decent. Even with our last week buckets. I mean, it's kind of disappointing because we have our winner being a last week 5. I mean, our winner has the 68th he's 68th ranked in this field with his bucket average. So this 4s, 3s, 4, whatever. In a way, it's kind of like, that's not good, but then you can see the SweetSpot score is 9th. So this disparity between the two may be a good reason to say, hey, sure, the buckets don't look good with him, but his score is way too good to ignore. Same with Webb Simpson. Yeah, he's a last year 5, but his score is way too good to ignore. I think the one, let's see, I'm going to go by salary and take a look of where Matthew Wolff is at. Matthew Wolff. So he was a last week 6. He had, he was pretty close with Colin Morikawa when it came to like the rank of buckets, but you can see his score was not good. A bad score with the rank, probably a good reason not to play Matthew Wolff. And we were kind of rewarded, obviously, with all of this, that his withdrawal didn't hurt us. I had 0 shares of Matthew Wolff, and a lot of it had to do because of the bucket system. So thankful for that. But it's really interesting trying to think about all of this, because I want to know, again, what the right combination is, but I also want to know when not to be bullish or when not to be bearish or whatever. I want to figure this out. The last piece is the strokes gain bucket. So if you remember every strategy video, I go through this. We talk about strokes gain in a different way than what other people do. A lot of people fall in love with hearing some analyst out there say, approach stats are the best stats to go with. You want to make sure we're finding the best ball strikers. So that's even off the tee too, which I would agree to an extent. But when you just hear like the best ball strikers, if you have your own data, and mine is used with the, I grab mine from the PGA Tour. I am now recording my own, But for my season-long stats, it's all from the PGA Tour. So if we were to look at everybody inside the top 10 or top 11 and look, I mean, we have some guys that have negative approach. Now, 2 of them are in the optimal lineup. The other 3, not so much. Actually, Kevin Na, bad approach as well. So if we're looking at the best approach guys, are you creating a lineup kind of going top down? You know, it in a way that kind of makes, when I hear other people talk about it, it makes me feel that that's what they're trying to say. And even if you selected guys inside the top 20, you would have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you would have had 6 golfers, which obviously you can make a lineup with 6 golfers. Maybe not with the salaries that I see what they're tied to. But even if you did this, yeah, you couldn't make a lineup with these guys. But let's say you were like, oh wow, you know, Lonto Griffin has great approach stats. So does Ryan Palmer. So does Mark Leishman. There's my low guys, and then go with my top 3 up here. That's 49,900. So that works out. You're not making any money with this lineup. So my whole thought process is I want to find different combinations. And again, that's where the bucket system comes into play, because it's giving a value based off of a combination. And the biggest one that I see on any given tournament is the off the tee putting disparities. If we just use off the tee and putting, which as a competitive golfer myself, those are really the only 2 stats that I necessarily care about, because off the tee, if I'm putting myself in good positions to hit good approach shots, that's going to give me a lot of confidence going from tournament to tournament. You know, hitting the green and putting it close, that's really great. It gives me a lot of confidence. But if I miss those putts, you know, that's where it might turn a little different, where if I'm really good off the tee, maybe not hit the greatest approach and then also not make the putt, I'm okay with that. I feel more confident as a golfer. Likewise, if I'm spraying the ball all over the tee, off the tee, I should say, and then putting it on the green wherever and canning that putt, that's also giving me confidence in a different way. But approach stats, maybe there are golfers out there that are a little different. I don't think you really get that much confidence off of gaining strokes on approach. Now, I get it. Colin Morikawa, one of the best in this tournament when it comes to strokes gained approach, obviously did well, but he's negative putting. He has positive off the tee, so he falls under that category. And even if I were to go ahead and sort off the tee, a few more golfers actually show up inside the top 20, but it depends on which ones you choose, obviously. You had 4 golfers in the optimal lineup right off the tee. So if you were to look at off the tee as opposed to approach only had 2 golfers in the optimal lineup. That was probably the way to go. But again, we're trying to find a good mix. So I'm looking at top 11, as always. It's top 10. Obviously, you know it's top 11 for this tournament. But I'm looking at this, and what I want to do is look at everyone who's positive off the tee, which actually looks like it's everybody. Positive off the tee. 1 negative off the tee guy, which super surprising. Usually we see a few more. But we look at off the tee, and then we look at putting. And really, we're always trying to find one that has one, I think it's like 1 to 3. We're looking for off the tee and negative putting. And then the rest of them, I mean, you can see already on the screen, all of them are positive putters. If we go back to this bucket page, I always tell you guys, look from left to right. Look to see how many people show up inside the top 20. It always ladders, like step ladders. I always talk about it, how it kind of, or step stools or whatever. Like we see more going left to right than we do, you know, right to left. Now, our bucket 3 was very small. But bucket 4 wasn't that small. Bucket 5, yeah, kind of small. And then the no strokes gain bucket, number 6. This is our 6th bucket, 6th ranked bucket. Look at how many guys show up in there. How many guys you could have just put an X mark next to their ownership. I don't want to own any of these guys. I mean, Thomas Detry, you could have put in your lineups and would have made some money. Same with Aaron Rai. But just look, you know, we had what? 20 golfers out of a field of 73. Just by strokes gained alone, if you were to X out of these guys, not even choose a single one of them, you were looking good. And really, what was it? Robert McIntyre, Christian Bezuidenhout. Those were the only guys that were 7K and above. Everyone else was 6K. So not very good odds on them. DraftKings didn't like them or whatever. If you're choosing out of this bucket, choose 0 to 2. If you liked Sebastian Munoz, you probably weren't getting Tana, but don't pair him up with Leishman, Woodland. Either way, you want to choose one guy here and stick to it. So if it was Kevin Na or if it was Woodland, that was a big decision. Maybe you just divide all these guys up by like 25%. You might get a good lineup that way. Especially when we're looking at this would be our strokes gained bucket 4 column. I should actually put those titles up here. Strokes gained 4, you can see only one guy showed up inside the top 20. So not even inside the top 10, not even inside the top 11, did not show up in the optimal lineup, nothing. You can see not a group to really select from, but the GPP winning lineup did have Lonto Griffin in it, so obviously you could have selected from here. But if you would have just stayed inside either strokes gained bucket 2 or strokes gained bucket 1, you could have done pretty well. I'm trying to find some value plays. Obviously, I guess Jason Kokrak would have been a decent value. Billy Horschel obviously finished second, so he was a very good value. Trying to think of all of the optimal lineup guys. So Horschel was an optimal lineup guy. Scheffler was optimal lineup. Morikawa, obviously, as was Kevin Na. So let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Koepka and Hovland. Pretty even. Everything positive, I should also put up there. I think these need to change, because if you remember how I used to always do this bucket used to include everybody that was in 1. Obviously, if all stats are positive, that means they're also positive off the tee, positive putting. So I would include them here, and it was 2 to 4. I need to know how to mix these up a little bit. So this might be, maybe I'll just put it up here. I think this has to be 1. I think they all have to be 1 to 3. Not all of them, but like all of these, the 3 buckets that we see that have positive off the tee. Again, I think that's a very important stat. So as you can see, the strokes gained buckets, a lot of golfers right there left to right. But obviously we can see, looking at everything right here, strokes gained bucket, Kevin Na is the only one that's outside of strokes gained bucket 3. So he's in the 5th one. And again, looking at everybody in the other buckets, so everyone outside of 3, how many total do we have? This would be a way to kind of eliminate a lot of golfers. 36, so half of the field are in those buckets. Obviously, you needed Kevin Na for your optimal lineup, but you could have easily replaced Kevin Na with where is he? Where are you? Kevin Na's here, 6,800. We could have went to Brendan Todd, 64. Actually, Brendan Todd was what? Last year, he was in strokes gained bucket 4. Yeah, he's right here. So you'd have been a 4. I need to find somebody like Abram Answer, most likely. Would Abe Answer have won us a GPP if we would have had every one of these guys with Abram Answer? Sure would have. 652, that's what it was. That's where the 652 comes into play. So 652 would have beat out that GPP winning lineup, and it would have only been 2.5 points behind the optimal lineup. So yeah, we could have selected all of our golfers in these buckets here. Could have. Very easily. So either way, that kind of is the overview of all of the stats. Now, what it looks like when we do the optimizer. So this is the optimizer. I put in a new column, minimum ownership. I did change my run lineups I know this might be confusing to you guys, but I usually like to run 10 at a time just to see who the high ownership guys are. And I do like to create around 100. So I usually start with 10, look at what it is, maybe, delete all the lineups, restart, put in different ownerships or whatever. But basically what I did, I put a yes. So I locked in all the guys that were in the optimal lineup, and you can kind of see, how it looks like on the screen. I know we already went through it, but if we're looking at the last year bucket, everybody fell inside the top 4. Last week bucket was kind of a little spread out. Course history had nobody, of the optimal lineups inside that course history 1, but most of them were in the 2. So again, using the max ownerships here, probably the better way to do it as opposed to looking at the minimums. Recent form, 0 for recent form 1, but we have 4 and 2 for recent form 2 and 3. Strokes gained bucket, there you go, boom. We already went through it, shows up pretty decently. And then the last piece that I forgot to mention, you guys know that I talk about salaries. Looking at all the salaries, I have to add the new ones now. But we had, again, going back to the 21 DK page, nobody inside the 11K price range, or 11K or and above. And if we were to look, I kind of was saying that is the best bucket to choose from. John Rahm was in it, as well as Dustin Johnson. They both kind of crapped the bed, did not play well. We will not see an $11,000 golfer inside the top 20 for this year, for 2021. So when I create the new year here and update all the salaries here, we're going to see that no 11K, and these numbers are going to drop down a little bit. We only saw 1 in the 10K, but a lot of people showed up inside the 9K as well as the 8K. So yeah, these buckets will change. They were already kind of popular, a popular bucket to choose from. Probably should have used that. Again, these are more or less salary buckets or price buckets, however you want to call them. But yeah, going strictly off of salary, to me, I think looking at it from an ownership perspective is the best way to go. Putting your exposures set to something like this when it comes to prices, or your constraints, so you can see in my max ownership, it follows along with that. I think that makes absolutely perfect sense. My optimizer isn't going to grab 78% DJ or 78% John Rahm, but it's giving the flexibility, like, hey, if you see the optimal lineup is actually showing up pretty decently, go ahead and select that. I also want to see this. So metric 3056. I'm just going to run this once just to see how it actually performs. I think what it's going to do is it's going to grab DJ right away, because I have, so let me go ahead and put 0 for everybody, just so we don't get that mixed up. So if I run the optimizer, this should provide the greatest optimal lineup. Okay, get out of here. So the greatest optimal lineup would have been John Rahm, Tommy Fleetwood, Sung J M, Ryan Palmer, Billy Horschel, and Kevin Kisner. So great with Horschel, perfect. The rest of them kind of stunk. And what did we say? 3260. So it was only 160 points less than that. We could have easily gotten there, honestly. I think it was 3260, right? I unfortunately don't have a way to go back and look. I was gonna say, I kind of already forgot what the optimal lineup was, but I'm remembering. Who's the last guy? I remember. I don't remember. Kevin Na. We remember that, right? All right. So this one was 33.44 for that optimal lineup, whatever. If we run this, 3056. So actually 300 points less. So that is more a product of my metric than it is anything. It's looking at this metric here, which again is the SweetSpot score. Remember, we took away, that's what I should actually add different here. I'm not gonna be able to do it right now because I have everything sorted differently, so I can't just do an easy copy and paste. But that is, I mean, obviously, if I did update the SweetSpot score during this video, and it showed up, you know, it showed that it was 5 points better altogether with golfers inside the top 10. Maybe that's how we get to like you know, Colin Morikawa. Obviously, I think it would have, because his score got better by, at his range, at his rank, significantly. But anyways, I just wanted to run that. The new minimum ownership is going to be nice because obviously you can see Brooks shows up. No. If I go and scroll through this and then run the optimizer again, you're going to see John Rahm showed up there, as well as the Tommy Fleetwood. But if I were to go and just put my minimum ownerships and say, hey, I want, you know, at least 1% DJ. Now this isn't going to be perfect because it's going to grab DJ right away because it's going to go top bottom. And now I kind of thought of a way to change that. Just depends on what my maximum ownership is. But boom, DJ shows up now. Now if I were to go save that lineup, run a new optimizer, now it's going to show John Rahm in there, and so on and so forth. So that was my kind of quick fix in a way. So hopefully it ends up working out. Now, what else can I cover? Is there anything else? Usually I have a little cheat sheet, but I didn't really go by one today. Yeah, I mean, we already covered course history. We kind of, here, I'll do one thing for you guys. I'm going to open this all up except for the out. And we're going to go left to right, and I'm just going to fire through all the stats so you can see what worked and what didn't work. And it's going to start with, well, first of all, you know, tee time pairings. Do we see any matches? Yeah, I mean, it's a small event. We're going to see a bunch of matches. Sorry, we want to go by position. I don't really see any more. Oh, 21. So you can see a lot of the guys here at the top 10. Most of them were highlighted. You would know that through the strategy video why they were highlighted. And obviously some of these guys were paired up. It probably would have been a smart idea to do that. I lost power. I think that's because I was messing around with the court. Wow, maybe it's time to end the video. Actually, let me try to fix this quick. That's why you should never dig around kicking things on the ground, because I definitely removed the power source that came to. There we go. Well, if you're here all the way through, it's because you're interested in finding out what these stats are. So I'm going to continue on. Tee time pairings, obviously, we kind of already went through it. I don't have anything else to talk about anything here. Here are the demographics. I would say how many Florida or really southeast region golfers do we see? pretty good. I mean, a majority of golfers on tour are living in Florida because of tax reasons as well as just the ability to practice. So obviously, if you can see all the Southeast guys, maybe that's a good reason to play them. I don't know how many there were. Quite a bit. So it would have been varying in range. It wouldn't have really given you a clear picture as to who to choose. It would have just helped you out a little bit. You can see what their official world golf ranking is. Obviously, these are the top 60 golfers in the world, top 70. So obviously, they're all going to be decently in the official world golf ranking. Forgot to show Colin. We already talked about course history, but if we were to go ahead and sort from top to bottom, you can see all the top 20s, the guys that are highlighted in green versus the rest of them. Course history wasn't really something to look at. That's why we had the buckets. Buckets kind of showed up okay. Bermuda stats, though, other than DJ, Morikawa was the second-ranked Bermuda golfer. And then you can see some of these other guys that I think would have been easy to get on. These all show up inside the top 20 of Bermuda stats at this event. So definitely that's a stat that we should have been looking at. And that's a no-brainer. Any of us competitive golfers, we know grass stats matter. So unfortunate I didn't go with more than that. The other thing I like to look at is looking at the top 10. I never choose golfers that have less than 5% when it comes to top 10 percentage at a Bermuda track. If we were to look, we have 0 and 3.7 a couple times. So this really wouldn't have helped us with some of these guys. Maybe if you liked Max Homa or Will Zalatoris, good reason not to play them. Or even Beidenhout or McIntyre, good reason not to play those guys. And Matthew Wolff. I don't really talk about 2021 Bermuda. There aren't enough events to really talk about it. We could look at last week's scoring stats for the guys that did golf at the Genesis, but I really don't know if, I guess this would be the first time. Yeah, scoring average, top guys. You could have easily selected any of these guys. Well, we had five guys in the optimal lineup, including Kevin Na. So just looking at last week's scoring stats probably would have helped. How many guys actually had scoring stats? 32, so half the field. Was everybody inside the top 10 that had scoring stats had positive tee to green? No. Kokrak, minus 578. Rory, minus 256. Now, you could always look at this like they're going to come back to the mean, which obviously they probably did because Kokrak usually isn't that terrible tee to green, nor is Rory. But then 7.97 on Colin, you could also say those guys are going to come back to the mean. In a way, I guess if we're going top to bottom, you can see who the guys are here. But sometimes they just stay hot. Again, I'm just going to go through all these. Off the tee looked really good. Again, it's that confidence thing. Really good off the tee. You can see approach kind of lessens with the top 20s, but pretty much stays the same. And then putting, you can see how volatile that is. So yeah, Kokrak probably had better tee to, or like off the tee approach stats than he had putting this week, but maybe he did have good putting. I'm not sure. We can look at recent form stats, which is also going to do that. Again, recent form is looking at the last 7 weeks. So if we go to recent form, top to bottom, you can see all the top 20s. How about their DK average? Yeah, looks pretty good. Scoring average? Yeah, it's okay. 2 guys inside the top 20. Or I should say 2 guys that were in the optimal lineup inside this top 20 of scoring average. So not really. I usually like to look at rounds under 70 to see who's really playing hot. Only 2 golfers again. So recent form really not showing up. You know, just looking at the last 7 weeks and how many times these guys have played. These are average numbers here. So, you know, positive tee to green. Yeah, it's all going to show up. I mean, this is a really small field. So, but approach, look at that. Approach doesn't really show up that much. And then we kind of already went through season long. I don't really have to do that. But one thing I do like to see Oh man, why did that happen? If we were to look at recent form versus baseline, so who's been playing hot or cold against their season-long stats, you can see, you know, the positives are obviously doing better. The negatives are doing worse. I believe that's how that is. I would assume. I'd have to look back. Green is good. Scoring average actually being negative is better. This is a mistake. I don't know why that's like that. So yeah, these would show up more as green. Darker the color, the worse. So if we're in positive, that means their scoring average has been above their season-long average. We can see who's gaining on DraftKings points versus their baseline. Again, this is kind of, are they going to come back to their mean either in a positive or a negative regression? A lot of guys in the positive when it comes to off the tee, tee to green approach, kind of negative with their around the green stats, and actually putting. So I guess short-term putting, it might be something to look at going forward for this tournament at least, and something that I'll look at for the next tournament, which is the Arnold Palmer Invitational. Certainly going to look into that. So that would be all of the stats, going through all of them. We went through grass stats, course history, even looked at the demographics. Yeah, that's everything. I wanted this to be a little bit longer because I wanted to actually, you know, do a really comprehensive review. It was a little, it was kind of all over the place here at the end, obviously with the lights turning off, but for the most part, I think it stayed on pretty decent. And hopefully you guys got a really good grasp of what happened in this tournament. It is a short field event, so when it comes to this type of process or any process in general, I think the best scenario, the best route is not to become too rigid. Keep your process a little fluid. That way, you know, we can account for just the random. I know a lot of people call this volatile, and it isn't, you know, it is and it isn't. Actually it is. I'm trying to capture the volatility in some kind of metric. But I think for something like this tournament, it's going to be worse in a way. Maybe not, because it really wasn't, right? I don't know what I'm talking about anymore now. So I guess with that, I'm going to bid adieu. Thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next preview video. All right, bye.